Mr. Executive Director, would you like to explain how the Midtown CRA functions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. As you know, as part of the budgetary process, this is the preliminary budget. We will be coming before you again sometime in February to do the amended budget, but this is required to make sure we meet the deadline with the City Commission accepting a budget. The budget before you, obviously, is our anticipated TIF contribution from the city and the county. 99% of that will be going to pay the debt service for the Midtown area, and 1% goes to administration. The items before you is the operating budget as well as the special revenue. And from an operating side, I'm happy to report that we will be again under budget this year. We won't know exactly how much. We won't know that until we reconcile in October. And that's the item before you, sir.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the only item on the agenda? Moved by Board Member Sarnoff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Gord.
Excuse me, Chair, before you take a vote, there are items being submitted into the record. Mr. Executive Director, did you want to share those details?
Yeah, that's the line item budget, Commissioner. Before you is a summary. That is a line item, so it would be as amended.
As amended. Is that does a maker agree with that amendment? Seconder?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The Midtown meeting is now adjourned.
All right.
12:35.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, good to see you.
Hey, how are you, man? Chairman for 3 minutes. Who's responsible for scheduling this thing at lunchtime? Not me.
Right, Peter.
I guess it is me.
Ready? All right. I want to welcome everybody to the Wednesday, July 23rd, 2014 meeting of the Omni CRA. We have, I believe, 3 items on our agenda. And Mr. Executive Director, please describe item number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 1 is the budget for the upcoming fiscal year 14-15. As we just did with the Midtown CRA, this is again an anticipated budget. We are anticipating a 10% increase in TIF contribution from last year. This will be as amended as well. The line item budget has been given to the clerk. Operating budget, again, is the same as last year. We are anticipating to be under budget. We won't know until October after we reconcile. From a special revenue side, there are a few items, and they're clearly laid out on the far right-hand column. The major contributions will be going to pay off the debt service for the port tunnel, allocating in that line item, obviously the PAC payment, the CRA police, which will be in line item coming up to you before, and also a significant contribution to the MEC. I'm happy to report that we are on schedule on that, and we want to make sure we allocate some for unforeseens. And that is the item before you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You want to make a motion, and I'll...
I wanted to ask for kind of a procedural clarification. Would it be possible to do the budget last instead of first, simply because we have 2 allocations that are in the budget? So I think the proper way to do it is to discuss those allocations first and then decide whether we want to budget for them.
We'll table number 1, going on to number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The item number 2 is something that the Omni CRA has been working on for some time. As you know, for the last several years, the Omni CRA has had the police visibility grant in operation. That grant allows for special operations to take in place to increase the quality of life, to ensure the investment and attractiveness of the Omni CRA for future development. Because of the accumulation of all those police visibility grants, we thought that we proposed to you, before you, a CRA police unit. In essence, that unit will be a problem-solving team that currently exists within the police department. The grant before you would employ and fully cover the cost of 5 officers and 1 sergeant, and that is from everything from their shoes to their cars, as well as the installation of 9 cameras. As you know, the police department is initiating a program to put police cameras around the city. The grant before you includes 9 that will be distributed within and located within the Omni CRA. We are very excited about this from an administration standpoint, only because we truly believe that this will help with the quality of life within the Omni CRA district. Obviously, as part of our mission, we need to increase the attractiveness for future development, for investment, for industry relocation, and of course, continuing that live, work, and play concept. Creating this unit will allow, we believe, for that operation. There's a few things that I want to make clear that I believe are very important as it relates to this unit. First and foremost, we are enhancing the current police department operations that are currently in the CRA. Currently, there are 6 officers patrolling A, B, and C shift, and we are proposing before you an additional 6. So we are enhancing the services from a safety standpoint. The second point I'd like to clarify is that in no way, and that is part of the operational plan, which is part of your backup, will myself or the board be allowed to direct or instruct the police unit exactly what to do. I think it's very important that we keep that line very clear. As I'm sure you are aware, and I'm sure as all of you do, I get calls from people within the CRA letting me know about problems, and the process would be no different than the police visibility grant currently. Currently, I get monthly sit-downs with the commanders of the area, and they provide crime stats and operational information that they deem appropriate, and I let them know about certain things that myself or staff has seen or the calls that I've gotten of concern for the community. So I want to make those 2 points very clear, and I'll repeat those. In no way do I or the board instruct or command that unit. They are part of the City of Miami police hierarchy, and they will remain so. There is no difference between these operations than what's currently going on with the police visibility grant, other than this will be a full-time unit. They will also help increase with community relations with the residents and business owners of the community, and it will be a full-time process. The item before you, like I said, includes 5 officers, 1 sergeant, as well as 9 cameras. And the total cost of that is $1,275,000. There is a little bit of a cushion there for unforeseens like overtime or maintenance on property or whatnot. This is a 1-year program. If the board chooses to do it next year, the cost will be significantly reduced, because obviously we have an increase in cost now because we have to buy the cars and equipment and all that for the officers. And that is the item before you, Commissioner, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there a motion?
Move it for discussion.
Motion by
Second.
Commissioner Suarez, second by Commissioner Hardeman. Commissioner Suarez is recognized.
I'll yield to Board Member Hardeman.
Just a few preliminary questions. I can see where the $1.2 million is coming from. My first question, and then we can move it on to someone else, is what do you anticipate the cost to be to operate this problem-solving team?
The revolving cost, like I said, the initial cost is high. The years going forward would be about $250,000 to $300,000, because then we would only be paying for salaries and benefits and things like that, if the board chooses to do so in the future. But the initial cost is higher because we have to buy the equipment, the cars, and everything else that comes along with a police officer.
If I may, when I'm looking at page 6 of the agreement, and I'm looking at point 8.1, it follows under, well, after the compensation to the city. It reads, on a monthly basis, the CRA shall pay for city services provided at the rate equal to the cost to the city for 1 police sergeant and 5 police officers, which at the time of entering this original agreement is approximately $588,718.50. So that cost, that 588, is that plus, is that what we should be considering will be the cost moving forward?
That is part of the cost moving forward if the board chooses to do so. So next year, once this item expires, I will be bringing the item back to you for a vote if the board chooses to do so. There obviously are some additional costs that might be incurred, but over the years, Commissioner, we have, this year, for example, we have allocated $350,000 for the police visibility grant. The year before, it was $350,000. The year before that, it was $500,000. all of which shows, and I believe, significant returns on our investment for the community. In total, we have spent more than this item before you is on the police visibility grant, and we feel that this is the better route in going about it.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please.
When you, and I read that you said it will be subsumed, that visibility grant will be subsumed. Now, are we saying that the costs that we have not paid to this date will be available to the police force to use in this program?
Well, I can't give you that exact cost because we haven't done the full reconciliation. I can tell you currently in the budget over carryover fund balance, I am anticipating that in the $350,000 that was allocated this year to be fully spent on those special operations. So, but once this item is approved moving forward, there will be no more police visibility grant. This will be the main unit, and any leftover balance on the police visibility grant, I will be coming before the board to deallocate and allocate as the board wishes.
And then my last question for the time being would be, as far as the equipment, I see that it appears that the police department gave us a list of what it will cost to have equipment for everyone within this task force. And it includes some, from handcuffs to the actual fingerprint readers and their firearms. So when it comes to the officers that will be there, my first question would be is, are these officers going to be a part of the City of Miami Police Force? Are they a part of are we choosing these officers from the force right now? And then two, would those weapons and other artillery that they have transfer with them, or is it necessary to buy totally new equipment for everyone?
Well, I guess you can look at it different ways. Let me address your first question, Commissioner. As far as hiring the police officers themselves for the specialized unit, there are guidelines within the collective bargaining agreement that they will have to follow from an interview process and application process. Any police officer of the City of Miami can provide their application if they're interested in serving in this unit. Obviously, we do not play, when I say read, the Omni CRA does not play a role in that process. We're out of there. As far as the equipment is concerned, to give you an example, if an officer gets selected to this unit and he has a gun, then I would assume that that cost would not be incurred initially, but there might be maintenance or upgrades that would happen in the future. But I need to assume from a budgetary standpoint that we are fully equipped and covered per officer for, he might, who knows what happens, but I need to make sure from a budgetary standpoint that we are fully covered per officer completely, from handcuffs to gun to car to anything. Whether that cost will ultimately be incurred, that's something that I will take a look with the commander and seeing if that's really necessary, if I need to buy a gun or approve a gun purchase if he already has one. But again, I need to, from a budgetary standpoint, assume that it's 6 officers fully outfitted.
Thank you very much.
You mind if I open up a public hearing and then?
No, go ahead. I was actually going to invite one of the public speakers who wrote me an email. I think he may have written one to some of you others, but he definitely wrote me. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You and I have been dealing with the police staffing issue, and I tag along on that issue, but you really started it, and you've been a pioneer on that, and you've been consistent and persistent, far beyond what anyone would probably think is reasonable, but what has clearly been necessary. And I think when dealing with an issue like this, it's hard because we have 2 hats. We wear our CRA board member hat, and then we are also a city commissioner. So the question is, for me, when I sit up here, I guess it really shouldn't be a question. I suppose the obligation is to the CRA. You're acting as a principally here, your duty is to the CRA. That's where your loyalty is. Even if there could be a spillover, somewhat negative consequence to the city, and that's the fear, because we always assume that if we were ever to get the city to the staffing levels that the city needs to be at, that would probably have some sort of a deleterious effect on Miami Beach or on other cities that are in the surrounding area where the criminals are inevitably going to go to when our areas are properly policed as we suspect that they should be. So Mr. Eliciar came and wrote a very comprehensive email. I think he's doing a thesis on community policing, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. I'll let him put it on the record. But he had a very good point, which is, look, if we continue to concentrate police officers in this area, is it going to have a little bit of a spillover effect on areas that are in the city? So I guess my obligation as a CRA official is to make the CRA as safe as possible. But I think he found something in the state statute that would allow us to have a little bit of flexibility with reference to some of the surrounding areas, and I'll let him make his presentation so that I don't kind of steal his thunder.
I got a couple of questions, but I'll wait until afterwards.
Sorry, Commissioner.
I have a couple of questions, but I'll wait until after he makes his presentation.
Commissioner Suarez, thank you for the floor. Commissioners, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this item. First off, I want to mention that even though I know some of the people here are going to speak on this item in terms of the ability of the CRA to do this and whether it's appropriate, I support it fully in its intent. I think that as Commissioner Sarnoff and Commissioner Suarez and all of you had spoken before, the city is under-policed and we have a problem. We don't want to be Chicago in the news. The CRA executive director and the people involved in this clearly have looked at using TIF financing as a way to get something accomplished that the city needs, which is praiseworthy. So again, the intent of me being here is not to impugn on the intent of this legislation. However, I'm concerned about a couple of clauses in the agreement, particularly sections 2.3C, D, and F. Basically, what these clauses say is that because of the structure of the new unit, it will not be allowed to participate within the city's wider service rotation call, patrol outside the CRA boundaries to respond to criminal complaints except some very specific major ones, and even then only with the express permission of the unit sergeant. And it's not very clear that the police officers would be, for example, allowed to go to court to testify in any issues that they would have if they, for example, stop a crime that's just outside of the CRA area. So that's a concern as well. I understand why this is done this way. The CRA executive director actually called me to explain to me the legal issue behind it in terms of the CRA being bound to spending money in the CRA area. But I think that putting that kind of strict limitation down to the agreement is kind of short-sighted and would be counterproductive to the program. As in the paper that I just gave you, it shows the different areas of the city, the communities that Commander Farrow has noted in his analysis that are high crime areas. For the most part, extended the boundaries west of northwest first to make my point. But basically, if you look at the communities affected by crime in the Sierra area and nearby, it's 5 or 6 distinct communities, and each of them has a different level and problem with crime. On Biscayne Boulevard and that corridor nearest to the bay, you have a lot of property crime, you have a lot of shoplifting at that Publix, you have car breaks and so forth. On the area that's Omni West, so like between the Arch Center and the train tracks, you have more of an issue of vandalism, some thefts, there's street-level prostitution, drugs, and so forth. But when you get to the parts that we know as Obertown, west of the tracks, and which are only covered by part of the CRA, you have a lot of problems with assault and drugs. And right now, the way that the agreement is structured, if there were calls about drugs or just like general disturbances, not assaults, that were happening right on the border, on Northwest 2nd, for example, by the way the agreement is structured, it says that the police can't deploy their resources there. I think that the decision should be left up to the CRA police unit commander. If he or she feels that the best way to patrol their district and the best way to secure the area of the Omni CRA is to deploy forces both within the CRA and the immediately surrounding areas, I don't think that it should be in the statute that they should be prevented from doing that. I understand that the CRA executive director has looked at this issue. I think that there's a couple of things that can be done here to give some wiggle room. The statute itself, Florida Statute Section 163.365, I don't know if that is the particular one that applies to this since I'm not an attorney, but it does say that when you're creating a neighborhood redevelopment plan for community redevelopment area or areas, and I quote, together with any adjoining areas having specially related problems, that you're allowed to cover that. So I think that under that, it would it would be allowed. As well, the previous interpretation of providing services to the CRA area has been pretty wide. In the past, for example, we have had the idea of using a global agreement with the CRA and the other CRA in the city to fund things like a stadium in Little Havana and a streetcar, which are not necessarily going to be completely set down to the area of the CRA. So in the past, the interpretation has been what? In fact, now we have another item for the funding to the PAM where, yes, that fund's going to go to the museum, but they're going to use it, for example, to provide art resources and services to camps that would be, as I understand, outside the CRA area. So again, no, it's all, okay.
That's not my understanding, but
Okay.
go ahead.
Maybe not, but in any case, I think that in the past that the CRA, the provision to provide services to the CRA area has been broadly interpreted, and it's a bad time to start interpreting it in a very narrow manner.
So why don't I do this? Why don't I let our city attorney respond to you? It does promises.
That's a great response.
Okay.
That's a great response.
Go ahead, Barney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respectfully disagree with the member of the public. Chapter 163 of the state statutes indicates that the funds that are collected by the CRA are to be expended within the redevelopment area to rid the area of blight and slum. The section that's referred to by my esteemed colleague, section 163.365, deals with the actual redevelopment plan. So if this body wanted to readdress the redevelopment plan, I agree that the surrounding areas could be considered. But as far as the expenditure of funds and the services that are provided by the CRA, it is meant for the redevelopment area in order to rid that area of the blight and slum.
Okay, so I didn't get the interpretation right, that's fine. But regardless, I think that the board should consider whether in providing services to the CRA area, it needs to be as restrictive to tell a police commander, to tell a police sergeant, you can't patrol in the immediate outside area, you have to keep, because right now, for example, you don't have that in the visibility program. You give them money for overtime work and you tell them do the CRA patrol area, but I don't believe that there's been an agreement that says you can only deploy if there's like a robbery or homicide outside of the immediate CRA areas. And the problem here is all the other stuff that the CRA, or most of the other stuff that the CRA does in terms of infrastructure, in terms of creating jobs, if you fix a pothole or a street in the Omni CRA area, it doesn't cost the streets to break in Overtown. If you create jobs in this Omni CRA area, it doesn't necessarily take jobs or industry away from elsewhere. But here, because crime is fungible, and because these areas immediately in the vicinity of the CRA are already high crime areas, I mean, it doesn't take, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen here. Finally, I know that there's a legal liability issue here. Obviously, if that's why this is being put in the first place. But there's a legal liability issue if the city provides this, not unequal service in terms of police for different areas that are right next to each other, especially if one area is a minority area and the other one isn't. Right now, the city of Chicago is being sued by the ACLU and an association called the Central Austin Neighborhood Associations for providing disparate services to African-American communities versus the white communities next to it. So there's going to be a legal liability in any case. Finally, I'm here speaking as a resident, and I live on 555 Northeast 15, which is right in that area in front of Biscayne Bay. So I'm not in the Southeast Overtown community, but I think that this is going to be bad not just for the residents of that community, but the residents of my community. I think if you create a system where you create a safe area, but the areas right around it are unsafe, you create this fortress mentality where people just want to go home, don't want to go out, don't want to interact with their neighbors, and that's not necessarily a mentality that you want to create in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to let Commissioner Port wanted to say something, and then I'm going to go back to the public hearing.
No, let me finish with the public hearings.
Okay.
I'll do it
Malcolm
afterwards.
Rustafel?
Good morning. You're not smiling at me?
Of course I am. I'm always smiling.
Okay. Good morning. So I just have a question. So if you do this with the Omni CRA, and then you do this with the Southeast Overtown Park CRA, so in a way, you're kind of, in the normal course of events, are these number of police that you want, which are actually supposedly more than 5, you're talking about a sergeant and 5, plus Am I correct in assuming that the other officers that you previously were using are part of that larger number? No? So it'll just be 5. Is that the normal accompaniment of officers that normally police that area?
The answer to that is no, but the commander's here, and he can address that question as far as what's normal or not. I don't, the CRA office does not get involved in that process. Commander, if you will.
How you doing? I'm Commander Lazaro Ferro for downtown. To answer your question, normally as it is right now, in our geographical maps, we patrol this area with 6 officers, 2 in A, 2 in B, and 2 in C, or morning, afternoons, and midnights. This remains the same. What we're bringing forth is those additional officers which will be able to assist everything that's happening with crime in that particular area. So it enhances the services that we already provide the community.
Okay. So in fact, there are now more officers being allocated to a very small area of the city that will be paid for through the CRA. So if you take additional officers that are patrolling the city as a whole and assign them to the Southeast Overtown Park West CRA, and then say to folks in Coconut Grove, say, well, you're doing that for those people, why can't we have these kinds of extra officers? And why can't we set up a taxing district of some kind? Sooner or later, you're going to balkanize the city. You're going to have a police force that's going to start being divided up and saying, well, they got more money or they have money to pay for more officers, so we're going to apply officers to those people. But because the 5 officers that are being assigned additionally to this district are being taken from somebody else's district, are being taken from somewhere else. And Commissioner, I have to agree with you. I've listened to you now for a year talk about the police department and the failure of the chief to be able to meet these staffing requirements that you've raised. I think that's a really important issue because this is the end of the fiscal year. Last year at this time, you were promised 100 new officers. Those 100 new officers are not going to be coming online. So if you're not having additional officers to meet the basic policing requirements of the city, and you're then taking some officers to provide security for a small 20-block area, 25-block area, and then you get another 5, 6, 10 officers for another small area, that leaves the larger city as a whole short by those number of officers. I think that's something that needs to be considered here. And as far as the cost involved, I really find that kind of amazing that you might, why can't every police officer, in fact, I think every employee of the city of Miami who works for the police department has a car assigned to him. I know every officer on the street has a car assigned to him, so why would you need to buy new cars? The cars are assigned to them. You know, that's part of the contract, that they get a vehicle, a take-home vehicle. So why would you need to buy more police cars for them and weaponry or whatever?
Okay.
That's the police force.
Need to wrap
Okay.
it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Renita Holmes.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Madam Renita Holmes, and to avoid being redundant, I was very concerned, and we initiated some conversations and did some research as those who now, after hearing you all in the last meeting, talk about holistic approaches to policing. And in this same meeting, I'm sorry, I apologize, I have a cold, we spoke regarding adding another line item for police officers. And so I wanted to submit to you how extra officers and best practices in community policing, and now adding to the more police I see, the more problems I have with civil liberties or any other issue for that matter of disparity. This Omni is adjacent to our area, and this is the picture, and I'd like to submit it. I sent some to the clerk's office. Unfortunately, we didn't have it. We were late, and I didn't have the agenda.
Thank you.
And it is a picture that's also been sent out and has a Facebook blog about. and articles regarding police officers along the track, stopping certain people. One had just been stopped. I reserved that video and pictures for myself and to be utilized, but we have Florida East Coast Police recently that Miami-Dade County has added. And I'm saying all of this because I'm reading Cop Block, and it talks about how the difference between private security forces that CRA normally utilize versus addendums to line items that we've already been given to them for general public and reimbursement. I believe that this item should be deferred because there needs to be more of discussion about how we utilize the police currently in the area and give you all an opportunity to apply your request for more policing and perhaps to avoid litigation from those of us who live in Overtown and Wynwood that are incurring, this is just one, there are several of these incidents. I'd like you to ask how many incidents have occurred in policing or wrongful policing or civil liberties issues and call back Pottinger. And so when we do things, we're culturally correct. When we talk about doing community policing, when we talk about taxation or double taxation without representation, when we talk about putting a limit on it, timing is everything, and I don't think this is the time for that either. When I know Commander Farrell has worked with my Homeowners and Renters Association Commissioner right across and within that area when we didn't have police there and we got kids and people in wheelchairs crossing the street. So I'm concerned about the specialized unit that we also have, which I discussed with the chief and several others last week on the sexual trafficking crimes like that. It is
And in conclusion.
in closing, I think it needs to be deferred. I think there are some litigation issues, and I believe that you're a lot stronger in addressing the needs for special policing for private police to go to one side versus the other.
Jerome Schiller.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sheila Jerome, President of the Beneficiaries Association. Before I start, through the chair, I just want to clarify what the attorney said. In regards to his request, is it correct that the police officers who's going to be assigned to this unit cannot work outside of that particular area? Is that what the attorney clarified?
I'll let the attorney respond.
My response was that funds that are expended by the CRA are to be used for services within the redevelopment area.
Okay, because I'm looking at Section D of the contract of the agreement says, on-shift officers of the CRA unit shall not be dispatched to a location outside the Omni area unless communication advised of a signal 29 and so forth of the immediate surrounding areas of the Omni area. So based on the agreement, they can't leave if they get permission, correct? That's what the agreement says. So in essence, what he's asking for is it can happen.
I will, of course, defer to the police department. Those signals that are referred to in that section of the agreement are extreme emergencies, such as a bomb threat, such as terrorist attacks, such as an officer under distress. So obviously in those types of circumstances, when we're more concerned about life rather than money, then yes, police can respond.
So there are exceptions to this rule. Just want to clarify that.
Yes.
There are exceptions to you saying they cannot leave the surrounding area.
I never said they couldn't leave the area. I said that funds from the CRA could only be used for services provided to the redevelopment area.
No, I understand that, but based on this exception, these officers who are funded by CRA dollars will be providing services outside the CRA area. Am I correct to read this way? Am I wrong to read it that way?
They are still City of Miami police officers.
But they're also being paid by CRA dollars, being providing service outside the CRA area. Am I correct? Am I wrong? Okay, I'll move to start to my presentation.
Let me clarify for you. They're not going to be patrolling outside the Omni CRA.
You are correct, Commissioner, but again, per this agreement, if there's a request, they can step out. So
All he's trying to say to you, and I'm going to say it as nicely as I can,
okay.
that there are certain signal levels that either a cop's life is in danger, maybe somebody else's life is in danger, a terrorist threat, that nobody's going to create a boundary effect. However, you would find these police officers in the Omni CRA, I would suspect, in the upper 90% of the time. Because simply put, we are a reasonably safe city, and they're not going to be patrolling exterior of their boundaries.
Again, per the agreement, there are an exception, but let me get back to my presentation. I'm a member of the Citizen and Patrol Program, a volunteer police program that goes out and basically patrol the neighborhood. We do it for free because we believe in our neighborhoods. The past year, the Downtown Ambassadors Program is a program that was created that you guys are aware of that's basically doing the same kind of services as far as eliminating blight and slum within the downtown authority without going into the police funds. I think when you move from a visibility program to a staffing program, that becomes a police issue. This kind of funding should come from the city budget. As far as taking community development dollars for police staffing, you're changing the whole, in my opinion, the whole premises, the whole reason you have CRA dollars. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eleanor David Melendez.
No, that was Elijah.
Oh, it was you, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. All right, any other commissioner wish to say anything? Commissioner Gord?
You going to close the public hearing?
I'm sorry, public hearing is now closed.
My question is, this 6 officers that was stated before, when you wear a uniform as an emergency, you're going to go no matter where you're at?
Yes, Commissioner.
That's to answer that question, okay? My understanding, the patrol is going to be taken inside, which is a regular patrol. Now, my understanding also, we also have the entertainment center. They still have police force that they utilize. This police, the one we're going to use at the Omni, are they full-time Omni employees, or is this going to be coming out of the different, will they be taken out of service in the regular city?
Are you talking about the 6 additional officers, Commissioner?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I mean, META is a separate issue, like you were saying. That's something that's sponsored by the clubs on 11th Street and within the entertainment district. From a staff level, could you repeat the question? Are they CRA employees? They are not CRA employees.
But the same officer can be full-time with you at all time?
Well, they're in that unit? Yes.
In other words, they will not be doing any work for the general police force.
That's correct.
They're only simply dedicated to you. So the 6 officers being taken away for the regular force.
Yes, the answer is yes, we are adding an additional 6 officers.
Okay. But that is taken away, like I was stating before, from service in some other places.
Well, as far as from a staffing, I'll defer that to the commander and how that operation occurs. Commander, if you want to address that.
Commissioner, great emphasis has been placed on the CRA grants and the way we utilize the CRA grants. My approach is simply to reward those officers that have been doing a great job in those areas. Those are the downtown officers. Therefore, to ensure that I follow the bargaining agreement that is in place right now, we're creating a detail within the unit to allow me the flexibility to reward those officers that are currently in the downtown area. By allowing those officers to now perform this task and be part of this unit, it would also mean they need to be supplemented later on through the hiring process.
That's what I'm going to.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So in the long run, that's going to help to the budget to bring additional police officers to the area. Now, Commander, you as a commander have control of the whole area.
Correct.
You have your existing ABC, they're going to be working with you, but you also some additional police officers. You do coordinate all of them, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Because that's very important.
Yes, I do. And you asked a question about META, the officers that work
Right.
at Entertainment District. Those officers are independent. They're being paid privately on an off-duty basis, and they do perform a specific function for that Entertainment District. I do manage those officers as well, and I oversee their operations.
And my understanding also, any emergency that takes place, officers will have to provide service.
Exactly. To clarify that, let's say, for example, our officers, if you're an Omni officer and you have to go to the station to pick up whatever paperwork or documentation, on the way back, somebody flags you down and says, hey, that gentleman right there, he stole my purse and he's running down the street. That officer's not going to stop and say, okay, let me call another City of Miami officer so they can handle that. They're going to go ahead, assess it, make the arrest, take over the case, whatever needs to be done. Like the commissioner said, 90% of the efforts and the target of operations are going to be constrained to that area of the CRA. But if they, in their daily routine and operations and in their business, encounter any crime, they're going to address it just like any City of Miami police officer.
Okay. I want to hear that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of summarize and go off a little bit of what Commissioner Gort said, which is, it seems to me that, and this goes to Eleazar's point, that provision D is tailored in the to give the maximum amount of flexibility as allowed by law. And I just want the city attorney to express that Similar to, for example, in Bay Heights, they have a police officer that's assigned there that's a special taxing district. They have the right to leave that special taxing district under certain circumstances. So I think that this does what you're asking for. Certainly, I can understand your desire to have want more flexibility. I just think that we have to be very careful as a CRA not to jeopardize ourselves by doing something that's in an effort to do a good thing, we cross the line. And I think our city attorney keeps us on the right side of that line. And you know, having been here for 4 years, we've been a pretty careful commission. And I think our new member has continued in that regard to be very careful, because none of us wants to be in a situation later on where we're dealing with some ethical issues or legal issues. To Mr. Crespo's point, because I don't think this was really answered, his point was we have a crisis, we have a staffing crisis in the city. And I think the commissioner has certainly been leading. Is this in any way going to make that worse? Is this going to exacerbate that crisis? Or in some way, would this somehow alleviate or help that crisis in a way?
It will in no way, shape, or form hinder or hurt that crisis, and it will help it.
So we're not going to be taking from our already existing staffing levels of officers and putting them in the CRA for a certain portion of time, correct?
This program will allow for the ability to hire 6 additional police officers by the City of Miami Police Department.
Got it. So I just wanted to be clear, because I think he...
Come on.
All right, let's not address, I got it. All right, so let me kind of, nothing we're doing up here, and I suspect Commissioner Suarez has been one of the biggest proponents with me, is going to change the fact that the City of Miami still needs to hire about 260 more police officers before you get to a staffing level of 3.5 police officers per 1,000. As we presently stand right now, we are at about 2.2 police officers per 1,000. However, at certain daytime populations, with 1 or 2 events, we go down to 1.8 police officers per 1,000. That is a meaningless number unless you put context to it. The context to it would be New York City, 4.5, Chicago or Atlanta, 4.5, Philadelphia, 4.7. So it shows that on any kind of staffing day, at 2.2, we are half any major metropolitan city. However, what I handed to each commissioner was the Omni CRA detail operational plans. In that operational plan, you'll see that the Omni district, utilizing the current population there of 21,560 people, daytime population, you have 0.5 police officers per 1,000. This is an article which says which cities in America have the biggest police presence, and it is written by Mike Masiak, and it lists about 400 police units throughout the United States. And you'll see Miami in there, and by the way, they happen to have gotten our number wrong. And Commissioner Gort, when we get to 1,360 police officers, we will be at 3.3 police officers per 1,000. However, I looked to see if there was any city in America, any. I looked at Greecetown, New York, El Monte, California. These are big cities. I'm sure you all know these cities. Westland, Michigan, Shelby Township. I could not find one city in America that attempts to police with 0.5 police officers per 1,000. If you don't think there's a police issue in the city of Miami, you simply don't want to believe the numbers. And to our cops' credit, it doesn't mean that we are the most violent. It doesn't mean we are the worst. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination we're not doing a good job. It's just that they're asked to do a great deal with a very thin layer. So if the Omni CRA can increase to 1 police officer per 1,000, which is, I think, pretty horrible, then we should take that action. And Nothing here today is going to do anything to change my opinion or vote when it comes to the next budget, that we simply put 100 more police officers in there. And if you don't know where they're coming from, they can come directly from the county, because the county is going to lay off at least 100 of them. And you will be on your way to 2.9 police officers per 1,000, which is still a horrible ratio to police a city. And then next year, when you get another 100 police officers, you could then get to about 3.1 to 3.2 police officers per 1,000, which is still an inadequate amount of policing. But at least you would be in the big leagues. And at least, as Commissioner Suarez would say, with the right chief of police, you would then have enough resources to not only prevent crime, but to investigate crime. And as I said to you before, if a clearance rate is acceptable to this commission of across the board 15%, then we really are not doing our jobs. Because we've got to get clearance rates above 50% in all categories of crime, in all categories of crime.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just want an affirmative statement from the executive director that this grant will not negatively impact the department, the general department's identified hiring crisis.
No, it does not, sir.
Okay, and I'm going to rely on your investigation and your expertise in this matter and the commanders on that statement. I think we're all very frustrated, you know. The chair has been the instrument of that frustration, and, you know, I think it all came to head in the last meeting, and I'm hopeful that, as the chair just indicated, that, you know, the manager, and I think the manager understands that, you know, this is now going to fall on his shoulders. This responsibility no longer is going to be the blame of the Justice Department or the HR director or even the police chief. I think we've gone beyond that. And as commissioners, we do have the right and we do have the obligation to judge the city manager, our executive director as well, and those are the limited number of positions that we have almost supervisory control over under the right circumstances. But I think, born out of our frustration, we've gotten to the point where we have had to put the spotlight on someone who I think we all believe is doing a very good job. But, you know, I don't think it's fair to the citizens of the city of Miami that we give anybody a pass on what I consider to be one of the biggest responsibilities as a city manager that a city manager can have. So I just appreciate the fact that from everything I've heard from my colleagues, we all seem to be on the same page. And one of the things I've been very happy about is for the 4 years I've been here, we've been on the same page a lot more than we haven't been on the same page, a lot more. So on this issue that's as important as it is, I'm just really glad that we all seem to be kind of backing each other up.
That issue is very important, but let me ask you a question. My understanding, you go to the numbers according to the population, and you have certain daytime population that takes place in certain area. I would like to compare the crime in those areas compared to crime in other neighborhoods, where you have so many thousands of people compared to other neighborhoods where crime is a lot higher and have less people. So my thing is not only the officers, but how do we employ the officer? What kind of plan do we have to really make sure that we get rid of the crime in these different districts? That's a problem that we really looked into it. And although we don't say it's an excuse anymore, you can get the budget for the 100 officers, and because the opposition that we have here from the ER or whoever you want to call it, it'd be very difficult to recruit them.
Well,
I mean,
Commissioner Gore, I think what you're saying is there going to be a direct correlation between the number of police officers and crime going down? And studies have shown more times than not, yes, but it's not an exact science. You're right. It doesn't mean a definitive that there's going to be less crime. But
how we use it.
How we using it?
How we use the officers.
Right. I think that's fair. Commissioner.
What's the plan?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say to Al Crespo's comment that at least he was able to see in the future that this is not something that is going to be an issue that the Omni and the Midtown CRA does in a vacuum. I mean, this is obviously something that I know that I've been considering, I've been speaking to the executive director about, and I think we're moving in the right direction because we have issues that we have to tackle in slum and blighted areas. And believe it or not, crime is one of those is one of the indicators of a slum and blight area, especially where, I mean, when you're trying to encourage people to move into that area. I mean, we can build as much as we want to in these areas, but if it's not safe, then people won't move there. So part of our obligation is to ensure that these communities are safe. So the question then becomes, well, does it create an unequal police force? Does it, and when I think about that, in some ways, someone may say, well, if you take from here, you give to there, then it exacerbates our issue. But to me, in a sense, it's almost like fool's logic. Because anytime you create a problem-solving team, in any type of way, you can have a robbery problem-solving team, you can have a prostitution problem-solving team, you could have a child molestation problem-solving team. Whatever you do, I mean, you're enhancing the services that are available to that community because you're tackling an issue that is of great need, and that's why you create these teams. And obviously, in these areas, part of the reason that we were eligible to be, for them to be community redevelopment areas, because we had a problem in these areas. And continuing on into the town of Overtown, the community of Overtown, we have issues that the presence of these police officers, the ability to police these communities and to add more resources there is something that we need. Now, so the question becomes, do you, when you have more police officers in one area, do they just push out to other areas? Well, I would hope not. I would hope that you make an arrest and you prosecute that person and they get put into jail or prison or whatever it deems necessary. Sometimes do people get out? Yes. Sometimes do they have enough sense to move? Yes. But, you know, criminals, what I've learned over the time in representing people, so I'm talking about people and criminals, but criminals typically don't respect the law. I mean, that's part of why you're a criminal. You can create however many laws you want to, however many police officers you want to. If someone is hell-bent on breaking the law, they will do it. So in this case, where I'm looking at a budget that is used to supplement the services of the City of Miami Police Department, to do exactly what I'm asking for my police chief to do in Liberty City. Give me more officers in the community, which he then has to find officers to place in that community so he can raise it from 6 patrol in this area to the number of 8 or 9 or whatever it may be. And he may do that across different communities within my district. To me, this is the same thing, but we're helping and putting them in this area, just the same way as I intend to help and putting them in the community of Overtown, because we have to have the ability to tackle these issues. From what I've read, I don't see any problems in doing this. I know this has been done in other areas before. I mean, I applaud the executive director for finally bringing this about. And, you know, this is why we're here. We're here to tackle challenging issues within our community using creative and trailblazing ways to do it. And that's what I see this to be. So the responsibility that I have at this moment is to the Omni and the Midtown CRA areas. And when we meet again, I'm sure we'll have the same discussion about the Overtown area, and I assume that I will have the support of this board, just the same as I think that most of us support this one. So with that being said, I mean, I am greatly in favor of this measure.
I'm sorry for beating a dead horse, but sometimes I get wrapped up in these arguments, which I actually enjoy this debate, because I think it's one of the more interesting debates that we've probably ever had here since I've been here. But areas like Coconut Grove, they have a bid, and they have security. Areas like Wynwood has a bid. By the way, I would love for Coral to have a bid. You know, but there are some areas that also take on these additional responsibilities on themselves. They decide to self-tax, you know, DDA, the same, you know, these are areas that do heighten their patrol, whether they do it through off-duty officers or there's some combination of off-duty officers and security guards or whatever. Those other areas do get it. There are some pockets that don't. You know, Alapata is one of them. You know, Flagami is another one. You know, that there is no, they're kind of Little Havana, parts of Little Havana. So, you know, we have to, which is why I think we're so concerned about the overall number, because there is no boundaries on that. So anyhow, sorry for that last digression.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's important, though, Mr. Chairman, and sorry, Commissioner Gore, because one thing I've said, when you take in more money in a district or in an area, it frees up additional funds to be used elsewhere. So, for instance, when I was able to secure the money for the Liberty City area, well, I'm going to have CDBG dollars. And now I have more CDBG dollars that I can put in another area besides Liberty City because I have these private dollars coming in. So here, where we're adding 6 officers, well, guess what? That's 6 officers that the police chief does not necessarily have to provide to the area because we've supplemented this area. So now we can say to Alapata, we need more officers. We can say to Flagami that we need more officers, and the budget is there to support it.
Commissioner Ward.
Let me tell you, when you look at this, it's a win-win. 6 cars, you buy 6 cars. When you have the additional officers coming in, you don't have to buy cars for there. The cars are there. So that's an expense. When you buy all the equipment, the new 6 officers you bring in, you save that out of our budget. So that's a one point something that we save out of our budget. So, and I think a pilot program is very important, because if this works, we got to look for places to do it, and how we put it together so we can do it in other neighborhoods with so much need. So,
All right, I'm going to call.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, sorry.
All in favor?
Mr. Chair, if I may, there's one scrivener's error that needs to be corrected on page 2, section 2 of the resolution, which I would hope that you would make that a part of your motion. It currently says $1,275,000.
Right.
It should say $1,275,000.
Oh, that changes everything. All right, would the makers accept?
Yes.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
CRA number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 3 is a community benefits agreement with the Perez Art Museum. Let me kind of touch upon our redevelopment plan, as you know, is basically the Bible that we follow from a redevelopment agency standpoint. As part of the Omni CRA's redevelopment agency, the second objective of that development plan clearly states that a part of our mission is to create a cultural hub and center within the CRA. It also talks about helping create a cornerstone to create a cultural and entertainment hub. Obviously, we are within the Miami Entertainment District within the CRA. We're moving forward that as the board has addressed with the MEC. We have the performing arts, and now we have PAM, the Art Museum. And we feel that PAM is an important component in creating that cornerstone from a cultural and entertainment hub within the Omni CRA. All this falls underneath the umbrella of creating jobs, attracting people to develop, attracting investment, increasing the quality of life, increasing the cultural awareness of arts and entertainment within the Omni CRA, and bringing attention to the Omni CRA so people will start living there, working there, and ultimately building and investing there. As part of that umbrella, we felt that the community benefits agreement before you would help with that overall mission that we have and is clearly stated in the redevelopment plan. The item before you is a community benefits agreement that will allow for educational and art and entertainment programs that will be held in the Perez Art Museum, which of course, as you know, we have supported in the past with providing funds for the remediation of the properties. We're proud to say that the Omni CRA has just recently completed the construction of Museum Park. As you know, the board has allocated over $14 million for that. It's open to the public. And part of the budget, you'll see we have allocated some more funds for future programs. But the item before you is for the Perez Art Museum to help with our objective in the redevelopment plan to create that cornerstone for a cultural and entertainment hub. With us here is Michael Spring and Joe Garcia, and of course Tom Collins from PAM. They are here to address any questions you may have, and that's the item before you, Commissioner.
All right. Is there anyone wishing to make a motion?
Move it for discussion.
Motion, and we have a second. Commissioner Suarez, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this is one, kind of like the last one, where I struggled with it a little bit because, you know, the city has, or the CRA, I should say, has already contributed money for the remediation, and the cultural center is already there. So, you know, one of the things that I took solace with was that about 75% of the money was for programming, you know, hard costs. So, I'll let, any other board member, if they want to get into the nitty-gritty on the expenditures of those funds that are programmatic in nature, or the executive director or Mr. Collins. The other piece was advertising, and that, for me, I think was really a tough one, because it's roughly 4 or 5 times the size of the entire advertising budget for the CRA. You could argue that CRA doesn't advertise enough. You can make all kinds of arguments about that. But I think it's a struggle for us. Advertising a lot of times is seen as a soft cost. And when you talk about the mission of the CRA in curing slum and blight, and you look at soft costs, and I think a third of those soft costs were dedicated to an outside agency. Coming in, it was like $85,000 to an outside agency. One of the things that I challenged the people who are here on behalf of Pam was, look, you need to really justify, we could be using this money to cure slum and blight in other ways, and it's hard for us as board members to reconcile all the different needs of the CRA with spending $250,000 in advertising, a third of which is going to go to an outside advertising agency. So I think, I leave it to them to, we spoke candidly before, but I think it's important that they make a little bit of a public presentation on why they think they need that amount of money, where it's going to go to, how it's going to benefit the CRA, and why do we need an outside agency? What are they going to be doing with those funds?
Mr. Collins, you want to come up? And if you would just address Commissioner Suarez's comment.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm Tom Collins. I'm the director of the Paris Art Museum, Miami. This particular issue, the question about 1/4 of the requested funds being directed, as you've said, toward advertising, I think I want to back away from the word advertising. 1/4 of the funds that we've requested are in support of the communication, the critical communication about those programs for which we seek support. We have a museum that has exhibitions. People know that the museum is open, and they come to see the exhibitions. We've requested funding for education, entertainment, and public programs that take place on an almost daily basis in the museum, in the Omni CRA. And it is about those programs that we must be communicating regularly with all of the audiences that we target, including schools and teachers, children and families, and the broader tourist population that visits Miami. So I want to back away from the idea that that's advertising. Of that $245,000 we've requested, fully half of that is the hard costs associated with the kinds of advertising you do see on Biscayne Boulevard. You see banners, you see wraps on the Metro Mover. You will, I hope, in the very near future, see some signage that will at least partially disguise the otherwise very attractive pumping station there at the base of Museum Park, and so forth. So we are talking about half of that money supporting direct costs that communicate to people on the street, people in the community, and so forth, what is happening in that park. Because remember, our museum is entirely screened at the present moment and for the foreseeable future by an enormous construction site. So we need to be visible in that way to everyone. Of the remaining half of that funds we request, of course, quite a bit of it is for digital communication, which includes strategy, audience research strategy. How do we speak to the audiences we're trying to bring in? It also covers things. I've just made a short list of some of the things that are in the remaining amount of the allocation request. Community relations, including street-level grassroots communications where we're sending teams into neighborhoods, including the Omni CRA, but in other neighborhoods, getting on the ground in Little Haiti and so forth, to hand out materials to bring people into the neighborhood, into the CRA and the museum. Media relations and media events that bring attention to the Omni CRA and to the museum. Audience research and audience development strategy, as I've already described. And this is, of course, quite a bit of that external consulting fee to which the Commissioner referred. And finally, the all-important digital and social media strategy, the programming, and so forth that supports that kind of outreach, which we know is critical to reaching young audiences. Finally, we are archiving, recording and archiving almost all of the programs or aspects of all of the programs that are addressed in this grant request, and we make them available digitally and in other formats, including television and radio, to a much broader audience outside of the museum. That is what is in that $245,000.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions, of Mr. Collins?
Can I follow up a little bit on?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
My follow-up is as follows. We, as a CRA, contribute on an annual basis to the Performing Arts Center. I don't know, what is it? It's in our budget now. It's,
Next year, we're projecting 4.3 million.
okay, so I think one of the challenges that we have as a CRA board is that we have a population of children and young adults that grow up in our community that are not exposed, partially because they don't have the money, you know, to some of these cultural, iconic structures, facilities that the taxpayers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and in some cases over $1 billion. And, you know, I've always struggled with trying to find a way to connect those two things. And so I think what would help me reconcile my vote is knowing that a good portion of this funds, or if not all of it, are going to be dedicated towards bridging that gap. For me, that's essential. I mean, that is got to be one of the primary missions of your organization, the Children's Museum and the Performing Arts Center. I don't know what happened with the Performing Arts Center when the mega deal, I guess, was done, whether any sort of public benefits concessions were made. I don't know, because I wasn't here, and I'll let someone else speak to that. But I feel like if we're going to make these kinds of mega investments in our community, we have to make sure that we don't leave our children who are growing up in our districts. In all of our districts, there are pockets of areas where we have children that can't afford to pay $150 a ticket to watch a Broadway show in the Performing Arts Center, So, I think that was where I was coming from on this issue. And I just want to make sure that even to the extent that there's a quarter of it that's advertised, you're right, I'm not going to characterize it that way, that's being used to communicate. And we discussed some very legitimate issues. That park has been, and we've talked about this before at the commission level, not used, it's been closed, it's been, they have challenges, just like the Children's Museum had challenges operating in the midst of the construction of a port tunnel, getting people over to it, and I think we made some concessions for them that I can still see from 30,000 feet in the air when I'm flying into Miami. But, I think there is room for, and there is a precedent for helping some of these cultural centers, particularly those that are being very careful about targeting their services to the least in our community that really can't afford otherwise to partake and enjoy of these facilities. So that's my point on it, and I'd love to hear what the other board members have on it.
Commissioner Harder.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My first question is, for some of these services that you're requesting, for instance, the talks and lectures, the after-school studio, the brick, I'm guessing Brick by Brick, and Pam Teens and Art to Go, are these programs that are currently in existence, or are these proposed new programs?
Unless they're otherwise indicated here, there are a couple of programs that are new, but almost all of these have been piloted over the last couple of years. So what we're looking to do is to consolidate and grow those programs.
So will the CRA be given the only dollars that will go towards the implementation of these programs?
No, not at all. In fact, there's quite a bit of private money that's directed towards these programs already, and we hope to be able to grow that.
One of the issues, and I think was well articulated by Commissioner Suarez, that I've thought of are the children that don't have an opportunity to visit this place. I mean, I would have been one of those children who didn't have an opportunity to do this. So, and with that being said, I mean, I know hundreds of children who live in my community that would not be able to do this. And as I read through some of it, for instance, many of these things say that these property tours are available to the residents of the Omni CRA, and I get it. I mean, we have to use the money within our boundaries. But when I think about certain services, for instance, that have nothing to do with this, but like, for instance, Camilla's House.
Yes.
Right? So Camilla's House provides a service to homeless residents. The CRAs, all of them, have given dollars towards the programs and I think most recently we gave for the MAD program. Well, I can argue to play devil's advocate, that no one who is homeless that is picked up, say for instance, from the Overtown area is a resident of the Overtown area, and why should they benefit from the service or the dollars that we provide to eradicate some of the issues that we're having within the CRA boundaries? So with that being said, what do you do when you have children that come from other areas that may want to drop in on a free daily drop-in tour?
Much as the money that we've requested for support of communications will reach many people outside of the Omni CRA to bring them into the CRA, the money that we're requesting for programmatic support here is focused on that piece of the programs that actually bring children and adults into the CRA. In the case of one, I'll give you one example. One of our largest service programs is a program called PAM in the Neighborhood. This is a program where we send trained teachers into community centers and churches and schools and summer camps in underserved neighborhoods throughout the city over the summer. This summer we have about 9,000 children registered to be served by that program. A part of that program, and the part for which we seek funding, is the part where we actually bring those children, or a great number of those children, to the museum free of cost. We also give them takeaway materials, art tools, and these kinds of things. That's what's in this request.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
I'll yield my time.
Thank you. I just, I think, just to refine the Board Member Hardeman's question, I hope he considers this a refinement of it. I think there should be a provision in this grant that the programs that we're offering are going first to children that are that live and go to school in the CRA. And I'll give you an example. We have tennis programs all across the city. I'm sure you guys have it in your district as well. Some of them are very successful, but they bring kids from all over the county. And sometimes kids in the surrounding areas are not allowed into the tennis program. So it's kind of a bone of contention that I've had with the administration, that we have these successful tennis programs on the one hand, but we're kind of cherry picking on the other. So, I think first and foremost, citywide or city services or CRA services should be for CRA residents. Then, to the extent that they continue another mission, which is to attract people to the CRA, I think that's a subordinate mission to helping people that live in the CRA. So I personally would like to see the agreement amended to reflect that refinement.
And I would support that amendment.
We can make that amendment to the agreement, Commissioner.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
No,
All right, we have a public hearing. Renita Holmes.
Thank you.
And Al Crespo, the two speakers. Any orders okay with me? Ms. Holmes, you're recognized for the record.
I'll let Al go, because it might be redundant. Go ahead, Al. Okay, go ahead. Okay, great. You pretty much said it, and that was basically my concern. I've watched Perez Museum grow and some of the local artists. So what we did, Commissioner, through the chair, was have a conversation. And of course, Mr. Muhammad was invited to the conversation because he's always astute as to what's being proposed when it comes to resources in our neighboring unit. And it was a consensus that it was about the children. I have a target public housing, I'm going to be brief, that's right next to the film industry unit over there. And then across the street, they have two soccer parks. And I guess you can say the thin line is this little funky looking border, which should be painted very nicely by some artists. It's still rusted out, and the kids are looking out. These are the kids in Rainbow. And as you know, this is the location where the mother was shot several times, and the kids were left in the door. We're still servicing this family. But my thing is that we have programs established where we use art. We even use our Police Equestrian Center, which is another program that we do with Commander Farrell. We're very innovative when it comes to policing and dealing with victims and children and culture. I would like to extend you and hope that this language provision that you're about to will offer us an opportunity to connect what's already there, because it should not be a dividing line between what a child sees as the rest of the world and its art and its opportunity to get out of this violent or traumatic situation that they're living across the street. And so also that allows you to focus on doing culturally competent education and outreach, because I can't imagine that I have numbers of artists from Booker T. Washington and from the Urgent Inc. program. You don't have to go looking. They're already coordinated, they're already been designated as traumatized victims, and they're already pretty much organized. So I thank you for having that connection, but I would love to work with them on making sure that the education and outreach is great, because little plastic cards that I see a lot of folks use in entertainment and that I've seen them put out in the performing arts and give to people to throw out and around and about is not efficient, and that happens a lot when you just post them in the CRA office or in places where the kids or the neighboring children do not go, and it's a waste of money. So I like the 8.5 by 15 glossies, but I can bring you a bag full next time I come. So
Thank you.
culturally competent outreach and connecting with us is extended to you. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Crespo.
Al Crespo. So the first thing is, if these folks need money, why don't you let them put a LED billboard on the building? Just like the Children's Museum. You see it from 30,000 feet, do you? Every time you fly over, it's shining in the night. So the second thing is, I asked the executive director, I sent the executive director an email 2 weeks ago asking for a public records request of the correspondence leading up to this, this document. Somehow I never got any response to that, yet here it is. You now have a proposal before you, and the documents that led up to this proposal I still haven't received. I don't think it was that difficult to provide me the documentation before this meeting. So my question is, is this another instance where the documents leading up to a document being presented to you were not made available for public scrutiny before you all vote on this? I think this is a serious problem. This refusal to comply with public records in a timely fashion. But as to the issue at hand, you know what I find interesting? I find interesting that the money, the actual dollars, never go to the people inside the district, right? It's always, oh, we're going to provide services. The people who get the money are not living in Overtown, not living in Omni, not living in, oh, well, we're going to invite the children to look at the art. Yeah, but who's making the money from this? Right? Who gets the money? Right? Advertising agencies, computer programmers, all these people. This is welfare for those folks. This is not, this isn't benefiting, in a real hard way.
And in conclusion?
In conclusion, the taxpayers continue to get screwed while the folks who get the money, get the money. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate those comments. Anybody else wish to make any comments in the public hearing? Public hearing is now closed. Coming back to this commission, all in favor, please say aye. Thank you all for coming.
I apologize, but unfortunately, this one also has Scrivener's errors, and I take fault for that. The title incorrectly spells basis, and the sixth whereas clause says Pam is located with. It should say located within. So if you can incorporate that as part of the motion.
And that motion was as modified?
As modified.
Okay.
So as modified, Maker, okay with that?
Yes.
I think you are. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right, wait, we have the budget.
Number one, the budget.
Budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you is the anticipated budget, projected budget for 2014-15.
Is there a motion?
Move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Very
Second.
briefly, just want to thank you,
Any,
Mr. Chairman, for taking it out of order, and not
problem.
letting the cart go before the horse.
anybody wishing to speak to this public hearing? Public hearing is now closed. Coming back to this board
As modified with the line item, itemized budget.
as modified. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yes.